Hello, my name is Bryan Houston, and this is one of a series of interviews that we are doing with legendary broadcasters in Texas and abroad who have been so influential and inspiring to so many of us in this business. And also my hope is that it will be something that we can share with future broadcasters to kind of talk to some folks who have blazed the path before us. And it is my great pleasure to talk to one of those gentlemen now. The legendary voice of the Dallas Cowboys and so many other sporting events for, all the way back into the 70s. Brad Sham. Brad, how are you, sir?
I'm well, Brian. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for taking the time to do this. I'm going to ask one question and then just kind of turn it over to you. How did Brad Sham become Brad Sham?
Well, everybody's got a long journey, and I think for me, it started with a desire as a teenager to be a baseball announcer, and that led to going to the University of Missouri to get a journalism degree. It was the, probably still is, the best undergraduate journalism program in America, and that led me to discovering that I could both be a sportscaster and practice journalism. And then there's a lot of good luck. There's being in the right place at the right time and getting a job that both teaches you and puts you in a place where somebody else hears you that's going to do you some good later on in the next job, and really the dominoes started falling. There's a lot more good luck than you'd think, and you can't account for that unless, of course, you believe that there's a plan for everything, and it's hard to account for that when you're going into it.
Where was your first job, and how old were you when you got it?
Well, the first broadcasting I did was actually in high school for my high school radio station. I was very fortunate to go to a high school in suburban Chicago that had its own little band, FM band. Didn't go very far, but we did the high school games. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I was doing a football scoreboard show, and when I was a senior, I was doing play-by-play of the school's basketball and baseball games. And that's the first broadcasting I did. Now, the first time I got paid for it would have been at some point when I was in college and worked on a couple of different stations in Columbia, Missouri, while I was in the journalism program.
Now, when you were doing those ball games in high school, I'm sure you were like most of us. You probably had some idols, people that you listened to growing up that were very influential. Who were some of those people?
Well, the people that you listen to, of course, are the ones where you are. Now, when I was in high school, it was in the 60s, so there was no national. I mean, there was national television, but you had a game a week, and so all of your role models and your heroes and your idols were mostly the people that you heard every day locally. So for me, the first one was Jack Brickhouse, who's in multiple halls of fame. He was the voice of just about everything in Chicago. He did Cubs and White Sox baseball. He did Bears radio and a bunch of other things. Did some Bulls games. Later, KMOX was in St. Louis was so powerful. People all the way down here in Texas heard Harry Carey and Jack Buck doing Cardinal games, and I always was drawn to Jack. I was drawn to his voice. I was drawn to his smooth approach, to his versatility, and later I was blessed to be friends with him and to actually do a couple of things with him. And I think one of the reasons that Joe and I friends today is that he knows how I looked up to his dad just the way he does, and I think that when I step back, Bryan, I look at the what I have wanted to be like. It was probably Brickhouse was the first guy that really inspired me. I probably wanted to be like Jack Buck and Frank Gleaver more than anyone else, because they were so versatile. And as I got to know Frank, especially working with him in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s, he passed in 85, I got to understand about approach, consistency, things of that nature.
I know when I moved to Texas, I grew up in South Louisiana, and the very few broadcasts that we got to hear were Houston Astros games where Gene Elston was the main voice, and he was always
right, and he'd been in Chicago also.
Very solid pro, terrific voice, had a very quiet manner. He was not an excitable homer, so to speak, but very, very professional and pretty neutral in his call. But when I moved to Texas, I felt like I'd hit the mother lode. I was about 19 years old, and all of a sudden I was exposed to Vern Lundquist and Frank Gleaver and Brad Sham and John Miller and people like this, and it was just like I had discovered a treasure chest. How did you get to KRLD, and how old were you when you got there?
When I got to KRLD, it was 1976, so I would have been probably 27. I got there because when I got out of school, military service was part of a young man's life. We were at the height of the Vietnam War, and young people who hear this can Google the Vietnam draft lottery, which doesn't exist anymore, but basically there was a draft lot. We were all draft eligible. Whether they were going to take you, your birthday went in a hopper for in a lottery. If your number was 200 and above, then you probably weren't going anywhere. If it was, the lower it was, the more likely it was that you were going to be involved in military service, and my number was 44. So I was fortunate to get into a National Guard unit during my senior year in Kansas City, Kansas, and that meant that I was able to finish my senior year, missed my graduation ceremony, and had to go into active duty in the National Guard. So I spent the summer of 1970 in probably a place that you're familiar with, Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Yes, sir.
And when I got out in October, my family, because of my father's job, had moved from Chicago to Dallas. And I didn't have a job, so I went home. And after looking for a job for several months, I got one in December of 1970 at WRR Radio, which no longer exists. It was on the frequency that's now occupied in Dallas-Fort Worth by the Ticket. And I was a news reporter. Now, I knew I wanted to do sports, but I knew also that I had to have a job. And so I got a job as a news reporter, learned a lot from that, eventually got into sports, just kept pushing, and didn't care about how much money I made from the station. I wanted opportunities. One of the opportunities I pushed them to allow me to create was doing the first sports call-in show in Dallas-Fort Worth. It was called Sportsline Dallas. It was on Sunday nights, and that led eventually to me doing that show 5 nights a week. And the fellow who was the general manager at KRLD, the late John Butler, heard it, because you always hear what everybody in town is doing. And even though I left that job and left Dallas Fort Worth for about a year and a half, I left in March of 1975. I felt kind of dead end and wasn't going anywhere. Nothing was happening. Wasn't real happy, and took a job as the director of public relations of a North American Soccer League team in Denver. That team folded at the end of the 1975 season, and after being out of work for about 3 months, the public relations job with the team in Chicago opened. I got that job, and I was doing it when the opening came about at KRLD. The soccer season ended, and I got an opportunity to get hired, so it's the middle of the football season. And I got that job because I had done the job I'd done at a smaller station a couple of years prior. So I got heard, and the guy thought that I had what he was looking for. Actually, I interviewed for the job that summer, didn't get it. They hired someone else, and when that didn't work out, they came back to me, and that's how I came to KRLD in October of 1976 to do sportscasts in the afternoon on a primarily news talk radio station, to do the talk show 5 nights a week, a show that had been created to compete with the one that I was doing, and to do SMU basketball when Frank wasn't available or didn't want to do the game, and to do color on the Cowboys for road games with Vern. And on home games, Bob Lilly had just retired, so Bob did Bob did home games. He didn't want travel. So I did pregame, halftime, and postgame at home. I did those things and color on the road. And that's how I came to KRLD, and that's how I came to start broadcasting Cowboys games. I wasn't hired to do the Cowboys. I was hired to work at KRLD, and that was just part of the job, a component of the job. And when Vern, who had been doing college games mostly, both for ABC and CBS, when he was moved to the NFL by CBS in June of 1984, they moved me over one chair. And that's when I started full-time. I did a couple of games when Vern was out of town or unavailable, but that's how I started in doing play-by-play of the Cowboys. And
wow.
I've been there ever since, except for, they moved stations in 1991, and so I did too. And I left after the 94 season to join the Rangers and do 3 years of Rangers baseball. In 95, 6, and 7, I went back to the Cowboys in 98.
And thank goodness you did, by the way. I just want you to know that.
Well, thanks. I felt at the time, and I feel since then, that if you just kind of examined the chain of events, it was pretty clear that I was where I was intended to be, where I was maybe supposed to be. And having said that, the experience of having done baseball, which is, as I said, what I got into the business to do, and to have worked with Eric for 3 years, that was something I wouldn't trade for anything.
I can imagine. I have to go back to the soccer days when you were doing the PR for the soccer teams. At that time, had you given up on the idea of going back in and being a play-by-play person, or anything like that? Had you pretty much thought that dream had died, or?
Yeah, I hit a place in the when I first went to Denver, I just needed a change. I needed something different. But when the team folded in Denver and I couldn't get anything in any broadcasting job anywhere. I probably hit a spot where I felt like I wasn't going to get another chance, and that was over, and I enjoyed it, and really just being in broadcasting was what play-by-play, great. If it was something else, great, but I just didn't see where that was coming from, and I started thinking about going to law school, and my dad had to come through Denver on business a couple of times in that period, and he said, "No, you're not quitting. You're not quitting. You just hang in there a little while longer. I'm not going to let you quit yet."
You may have the first father in history that talked his son out of going to law school to stay in broadcasting.
How about that?
That's because I can assure you, I wouldn't have that conversation with my son.
Yeah, well, I think the blessing for me there obviously was that my dad knew that my heart was somewhere else, and he really wasn't interested in seeing me not follow my heart.
Right. Yeah, and in all seriousness, that's what I tell my son. I want him to do what he is gifted at, and what
right. Sometimes we don't know what we're gifted at. I don't know that I would have ever thought of myself as gifted at it, but I did know that I loved it.
Right.
And I think he could see that.
Well, and that's what I would want my son to do. I want him to do something that he's gifted at, that he loves and has a passion for. So,
right.
Obviously talking about law school, that'd be a nice thing to think of, but if it doesn't go that direction, that's fine too. And then talking about getting back into radio, you get the job at KRLD, and I have to ask you, first of all, where did the sports talk show idea come from? Were you exposed to sports talk shows in the Chicago area, or did you?
Yeah, I was. That's where it came from. When I was in high school, there's a guy named Rick Weaver who, in the '60s, also turned out to be one of the voices of the Cowboys for a year or so. Later went on and did a lot of other things, and I think the last job that he had was doing the Miami Dolphins. But he had a show. I don't remember the name of it even, but he had a radio show in Chicago. And I remember talking to Ernie Banks one day. I called in and talked to Ernie Banks, and I thought that was about as cool as it got. And when I was at WRR, I thought there's nothing like that here, and I know how excited I was as a kid getting to do that. Let's do it. And they didn't want to do it, and I pestered them and pushed them, and they finally said, okay, we'll give you an hour on Sunday nights, but we're not paying you anything. And I said, I don't care about that. I just want to do the show.
Wow. All right, so what was your philosophy? What was your goal? What was it that you were trying to achieve with that show each night?
I wanted to get to talk to the equivalent of Ernie Banks. It was more of an interview show. I knew we'd open it to calls, and I didn't really have much of a concept of the fact that we probably weren't going to get any. And of course we didn't. But it was such a new concept here that surprisingly I didn't have a lot of trouble getting people to come be part of it. Everybody. I remember having Mike Ditka on one of the first shows, and Mike was understood because he'd been in Chicago. Other people who weren't the Cowboys in 1971 in Dallas were happy to have the attention and the publicity for their programs. So I remember Hayden Fry was the coach at SMU, and he was on one of the first shows. In '72, the Rangers came. I had no problem getting them. Toby Harrah, the shortstop, was one of the first guests I had. And my attitude was that whoever I could get was a welcome guest. And so I tried to get names of people that were recognizable, pro athletes, coaches, general managers, that kind of thing. And my approach and my attitude and my philosophy was to conduct a professional interview and give people an opportunity, if it came to that, to take some calls. Eventually we did a few, and just have fun and do something cool.
And it turned into an enormous success. Sports Central Dallas, the first show. Did you ever imagine when you were doing that show that you would see 24/7 talk stations, sports talk stations?
Oh, no, of course not. No, and it's my judgment is it's not necessarily for the better. I think a lot of now this is just me, and that's why they make chocolate and vanilla, and that's why your remote has a channel changing button on it. But for my mind, when you increase the volume, I mean, you can see this in the expansion in sports. You can see it in a lot of things. If you are limited in what you have to offer, then the emphasis will be on quality. When you open it up and voluminize it, then the emphasis is on filling time. And so even when I was doing Sports Central, and had a really good 15-year run doing that, and there were two shows in town basically. Norm Hitzges did one for a while, and Randy Galloway wound up doing it, and obviously created a whole second career for himself. There were basically two shows for most of that time, and they were appealing to different audiences because the radio stations appealed to different audiences. WBAP or Cliff had one audience, KRLD had a completely different audience, and so we could conduct our shows according to what the audience wanted or would put up with. But when you start looking at three stations going 24/7, then you're just trying to get attention, and you'll do anything. And that's what happens a lot. People do anything. They talk about things that aren't sports. They dominate the conversation. I've had this conversation with people in network radio who program talk. You know, basically what I did more than anything else, I scheduled a lot of guests, and almost always my audience had direct immediate access to the guests. That was understood. And when I didn't have guests, or sometimes intentionally, I would just have what I call open lines. I thought it was important to give people an opportunity to use their airwaves, they own the airwaves, to talk about whatever it was they wanted to talk about. It was my responsibility to be ready to talk about whatever it was. And so as time went on, we had more things come in. People want to talk about hockey, I better be ready to talk about hockey. People want to talk about auto racing, I better be ready to talk about auto racing. Sometimes I would drive the conversation if I thought something was important, and I could do that. Now, there's no such thing as an open line anymore anywhere in Dallas-Fort Worth that I'm aware of. The station, and this is a network philosophy, decides what we're going to talk about this segment, and so now we'll talk about the Rangers and how bad they are, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about the Mavericks and what a horrible decision they've made. There's a great deal of emphasis on negativity instead of positivity, and I'm not a fan of that. Sports are supposed to be fun. I think that we should. I don't think we have to be cheerleaders, but I do think that we. In fact, I think that the public is best served by us being impartially critical, and that also means complimentary sometimes. but I think we set the tone a lot, and so we have to be careful how we set it. And sometimes, as much as we like our teams to win, and we all like our team to win, but as much as we like that, sometimes the other team wins. And it's not because our team choked or didn't try or was a bunch of idiots. It was just because if you and I go play tennis and you're better than I am, then there's a pretty good chance you're going to win. Now, sometimes if I'm smart and I get a little lucky, maybe I'll win every now and then. But if you're better than me, then the chances are you're going to win. And the only thing I can then expect of myself is to do my best. And I think when we're setting an example for youngsters, when we're giving messages to people, when the message is the only thing that's acceptable is winning, you're setting yourself up for difficulty, because not everybody wins all the time if you define winning as lifting the trophy. Now, you can also define winning as living life the right way, being the right kind of human being. You can define it by saying, here's what, and I say this to people all the time, when I buy tickets, and I do, I buy Ranger tickets, I buy Maverick tickets, happy to buy Stars tickets, and nowhere that I'm aware of in the price of that ticket is there a guarantee of a result. Mm-hmm. What I do think I'm entitled to for the investment of my time, money, and emotional energy is maximum effort, and I want my team to play smart. I don't want them to be dumb. And I don't want them to not try all the time. I want to see hustle. I want to see them win. Sometimes they won't win. And again, that's not part of the ticket price, in my opinion. But I don't see the reason for doing what I hear a lot of on sports talk radio, not just locally, nationally too, all over the country. And that is making it personal. Questioning someone's character or intelligence because they didn't win. I was at a function last night, and I sat with a guy, I mean, I'd never met him, but he seemed to me to be a guy, a long-time Dallasite, native Dallasite, sports fan, great values, the terrific approach, it seemed to me, big Cowboy fan all his life. And he said, I've got a question for you. I said, sure. He said, if you saw Jackie Smith today, what would you say? Now, for people listening to us who don't know, Jackie Smith was a Hall of Fame tight end for the Cardinals, who I believe had retired and came out of retirement in '78 when the Cowboys had a bunch of injuries. They were a division opponent of the Cowboys. They played them twice a year. He was a fierce competitor. They were desperate for a tight end, went against their personal philosophy and signed someone who'd been with another team. He helped them get to the Super Bowl, and in that Super Bowl against Pittsburgh, he dropped a famous pass from Roger Staubach in the end zone, and that helped shape the result. The Steelers won the game. So he said to me, this fellow last night, what would you say to Jackie Smith if you saw him today? And I said, oh, I'd say thank you. He said, thank you? Why would you say thank you? And he was stunned and outraged. And I said, well, I'd say thank you for his effort. He didn't drop the ball on purpose, for crying out loud. He, Vern's famous call is, bless his heart, he's got to be the sickest man in America, and I think that's right. But I said Jackie Smith had to, remember the era that he was in, he had to come from a different team. He had to accept a whole new way of doing things in order to get this opportunity to win, which he hadn't had in St. Louis. He helped the Cowboys get into that Super Bowl game So he made a. I said, have you ever made a mistake? Yes, but that would. No buts. We've become unforgiving. In my opinion, we have become unrealistic, and I think that through the way we approach sports, which is supposed to be fun and can be a great source of lessons, I think we're frequently teaching all the wrong lessons.
Can I ask a question then, based on what you're telling me, and I agree with what you're saying? Can a broadcaster succeed in 2014 doing it the way you're describing, as opposed to the bombastic, critical way that we do it now?
Well, yeah, sure it can. I hope that that's what we do. I hope that we are. I mean, you know, look, I'm excited. People know what my emotions are. I'm not very good at hiding them when I'm doing a Cowboy game. When I'm not doing a Cowboy game, if I'm doing national radio of, you know, football game, if I'm doing the Cotton Bowl, or if I'm doing Big 12 basketball, then you play it down the middle, and you, I think, appreciate everyone's effort, and you're not celebrating anyone. If you're doing a team's games, whether you're the voice of a high school or a college or a pro team, then clearly you want that team to win. And when I think the Cowboys aren't playing up to their ability, even though it's not my place to judge, I'm a fan too, and people can tell it in my voice readily when I don't think they're doing what they can do. And there's a difference between disappointment and disgust. We're all disappointed when our team doesn't win, but I think you have to manage your expectations. You ought to know when the game starts, and certainly when the season starts, what do you think it's reasonable to expect from my team today, this year. And as long as they do their best and play smart and play hard, then I think that you can be all for them, whether you're doing the University of Texas or Southeastern Louisiana or Jacksonville, Texas High School or the Dallas Cowboys. You be for them, but you don't be critical in a personal way, and you don't question someone's intelligence or character, unless you know that that's an issue, and I mean know, not think. And then if it is, then that's fair game. But if it's not, if it's just the playing of the game and someone made a physical mistake, you know, I'm afraid we all make them, and so we better get used to the fact that athletes make them too. You know, nobody gets paid more than singers and movie stars. Movie stars get retake after retake after retake. You know, a singer or an athlete who is out there doing it live, or an actor in a stage play, they don't get editors and retakes. And so there are going to be human hiccups. That's just going to happen. It's part of life. The question is, what do we learn from it, and how do we deal with it?
I know we're tight on time here. I don't want to be disrespectful of your time. I just have
you're fine.
Couple more questions here. When you got to KRLD and you came with the idea that you're going to be doing the daily talk show, and you're going to be doing sportscast, and possibly doing some fill-in play-by-play, and then suddenly you're the color analyst for Cowboys games. What did that feel like? I mean, that had to. I just can't even imagine having that handed to you, and you not just being overwhelmed by the idea.
Well, you know, as you may remember, when you're young, you're also frequently stupid. And so you sometimes are too stupid to know exactly what you should be afraid of, and that can help you. It can stand you in very good stead.
Ignorance is bliss.
That's what they say. And so I think that initially the answer to your question is that I was giddy, and I was just so happy to be doing what I was doing that that's all I could think about. As I began to do it, I listened to what I was doing. I realized pretty quickly from my own ears that it was going to have to get a whole lot better quick if I wanted to keep doing it. And I really think that very rapidly I changed my approach, certainly within that season. By the time 77 started, I was trying not to do color. I was trying to do more of what we call analysis today, which was hard because I didn't ever play the game. But I did learn who to ask and how to, how to keep my mouth shut when the question was being answered and pay attention and educate myself. And that is still one of the parts of the job that I find most invigorating. I think I've gone from what Bill Parcells liked to say, you don't know what you don't know. I think I've gone to that phase that Bill would refer to as knowing what I don't know. And the learning of that, knowing what I don't know, knowing who to ask and how to process the information, that's one of the parts of the job that I enjoy the most today. And so I think you never get done learning. You never, as soon as you think that you have figured out everything there is to figure out, then you better go do something else because you haven't.
Then you moved over into the play-by-play seat. Tell me about your approach and your style. How would you describe it? What are the things that you try to achieve when you are doing play-by-play on the radio for the Dallas Cowboys?
One of the ways that I know how to answer that question is that I still review my work every week. And I think that the thing that you have to do doing play-by-play on the radio is bring the audience into the event with all of their senses. Now, radio and television are different, but I imagine that I am speaking to a sightless person or a truck driver who can't see the game or someone in a duck blind. My job is to not only tell them what happened on the football play, but to enable them to see the colors and hear the sounds and smell the smells. And I think you have to pay attention to every little detail in doing that. And when it comes to the description of the action, you have to try to be as descriptive as possible. So I don't like commonly used terms like near side and far side. That doesn't tell me anything, but right and left means something to me. Mm-hmm. So if I establish that we are sitting together looking at the field and the team is moving from our left to our right, and the ball goes to the left side or the right side, then I know where that is. And I think you have to try to be. What I try to do is be as descriptive and analytical as I possibly can. I want to bring you into the stadium. I want you to know what the emotions are. I want you to know what it looks like, and then I want to tell you exactly the big picture of the game. And statistics are great, but they don't all have meaning. So in the preparation, I think you have to have weeded through those statistics and find the ones that are important and interesting and apply them to today's game, and then you have to be ready for whatever happens, which could be anything.
And what is your role as a play-by-play announcer in terms of involving your color man?
Well, having been a color man, unless you're working alone, I think it's important that that person is there for a reason. Now, on the radio, I have to do my job first or the audience isn't well served. On television, the analyst really should be the star of the show, because I can see the action when I turn on my TV. I don't need you to tell me what happened. I need you to kind of big picture it for me and remind me who some of the individuals are. But I don't need you to tell me it's a fly ball to center field, or a pass over the middle, or a three-point shot, because I can see that. The star of that show has to be the analyst to tell me why. On radio, the primary job is to describe the play. But I am fortunate now, for instance, to work with just a tremendous analyst in Babe Laufenberg, and I'd be cheating my audience if I didn't give him an opportunity to tell everyone why what just happened. So the mechanics of that is something that I still fall short of frequently. But I need to be as concise as I can, because there's only so many seconds. There's a finite amount of time between plays. And Babe and I both know, and Christy Scales, our outstanding sideline reporter, we all know approximately when I need to have it back so that I can set the formation and paint that picture. So it's my responsibility to finish the play as quickly as I can finish it and let Babe do his job, because I think the audience is better served when he's involved and telling everyone why something happened. Not platitudes, not, well, that was a big one, but why did that happen? I know it was a big one. Why did that happen? And he's really good at that.
Same approach with all of your other sports?
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. I think anything you do on the radio, the play-by-play person has the first responsibility to be all five senses and be as descriptive as possible, and then to be a good teammate and get the analyst involved as much as possible. And that's whatever sport it is. On television, the play-by-play person, in my opinion, should always hear Pat Summerall's voice in their head. Should always just drive the bus. Minimalist approach. Analyst is the star of the show.
Frank Gleber and Vern Lundquist, previous partners, both went on to do television network play-by-play. Were you ever tempted to do that? Did you ever want to do that, or are you?
Well, sure, I still want to do it.
On a full-time regular.
But there just comes a, they didn't go on to do it. They were doing it.
Right.
And
but they went full-time with it, and I was just wondering if that's something that you still desire to do.
It depends now on what job it would be. I mean, when you ask if I still do, God willing, before this training camp is over, I'm going to be 65, and or just about the time it ends. And so I'm my passion for what I do is stronger than it's ever been, and I think I don't believe I've fallen off any, but someday I will, and that just happens. I can't do anything about that. What I have to try to do is forestall that as much as possible. It also means that network television people are not looking for me.
Right.
It no longer matters, if it ever did, how good I am. To them, what matters is, well, I'm 65 and I'm a career radio guy, and that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody preferably in their 30s with dark hair and a flat belly and a great voice, and someone who they can build around. And I understand that. I really didn't make a concerted effort to do more television until about 1998. The fact of the matter is that even then, in my early 50s or late 40s, that was too late.
Right.
That was too late to try to get into television full time. Now, I get the opportunity to do some regional stuff like the Big 12 network, and but now the other thing that I've come to understand about the industry is there's TV jobs and TV jobs.
Right.
So everyone wants the job Joe Buck has, but Fox might have. We'll just use Fox as an example. They might have 5 games on a Sunday, and someone's doing the 5th one.
Right.
Well, so now if you pop up and you're in your mid-50s, so 10 years ago, and you have the opportunity to be the 4th guy at Fox, and you're doing the Carolina-Tampa game every week for not any kind of a salary that you could retire on, and 4% of the country is seeing it, or you have a chance to do what I'm doing, well, I'm not sure just because it's on television it's a better job anymore.
I agree.
So you have to kind of, it's not always apples to apples. I mean, if I had, now, you know, I did try to get, I tried to get the NFL Network Thursday night job when they hired Bob Papa, who was the radio voice of the Giants, and it came down to me and Bob. And I like Bob. I think one of the differences is he lives in New York.
Right.
And that matters. And so, okay, you have to be happy where you are while you're trying to do as much as you can. But you always have to be happy with what you have. If you're not happy with what you have, then it's your attitude that needs work. And that doesn't mean you're not trying to get more or do better. It means that you're able to appreciate and be grateful for what you have.
Which is a great life lesson, and this is the last question. My son and many like him are considering going into this industry now, which is far, far different than the industry that you and I got into back in the 60s, 70s, so forth. What advice would you give to a young person now thinking about going into broadcasting with the eye toward going into sportscasting?
Well, I give them the same speech all the time, Brian, and it's basically got 2 parts to it. And one is don't chase the money. Everybody wants more money. I want more money. You want more money. The people who have all the money, they want more money. Everybody wants more money. There's nothing wrong with money. Don't chase it if you're a kid trying to decide what to do for a living. And the reason that you don't chase it is what you come to find with time is that if you're doing something that you really, really love and you're really passionate about, chances are you're probably making enough money. You can probably get by. But if you're not doing something that you love to do, if you get up in the morning and you just cannot stand the idea of going to work, then there's a hole in you that no amount of money can fill. So don't chase the money. Figure out what you're passionate about and do that. Back to the law school discussion. Figure out what you're passionate about and do that. And the second piece of advice that I have for them all the time is there's a long list of things in life that we cannot control. When you're a kid, you can't control your parents. When you're in the workforce, you can't control your boss. You can't control the weather. You can't control the traffic. If you're in a relationship, heaven knows you can't control that person. There's a whole list of things that you can't control. Sometimes you can influence your own circumstances, but there's a list of things you can't control. Now, we have free will, so if it's your choice to spend your emotional energy fretting about things you can't control, then have at it. I don't find that productive for me, but if that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it. I don't recommend it. On the other side of the coin are the 2 things that you can control and only you can control. One of them is how hard you work. I really don't have the voice I'd like to have. I don't have a lot of physical characteristics that I would like to have. Some of those things I can influence, and some I can't. I can work on my weight. I can't work on my height. I can't. I look like what I look like. I sound like what I sound like. Yeah, are there refinements you can do? Sure there are. But basically, you are what you are. But what I can do is I can outwork you. I can make a decision to work harder than you every day, ending in Y. And if I do that, then there's a decent chance that the people that I'm working for are going to notice that. The other and probably most important thing that I can control and no one else can control is my attitude. And if I decide to have a bad attitude, if I decide to gripe, moan, whine, complain, look for the negative, I am guaranteed 100% of being successful at doing that. If I choose, on the other hand, to be grateful, centered, find whatever good there is in whatever bad situation, if I decide that my attitude about this day, this task, is going to be good, everything in my life is going to be better. And no one controls that attitude but me. So that's what I tell them. Don't chase the money. No one but you decides how hard you work and what your attitude is. So fix your attitude. If you don't like circumstances, change them. Do something about them. Get a different job. Try a different line of work. Do something different. Don't just sit there and complain about it. Do something about it. But your attitude about it is completely up to you.
Fantastic. Brad, I have to tell you that one of the most encouraging and refreshing things about being in this business over these many years is that meeting people like you and Vern Lundquist and other folks in this business is that you guys not only are consummate professionals and excellent at what you do, but the fact that you are so generous with your time, and the evidence is right here in the amount of time you spent with me doing this today. It really shows me that you can be very good at your business, be a celebrity, and be a very good person too. And that's another thing I hope that people understand, is that you don't have to be an egomaniac to become of legendary status in this business. And I appreciate the role model that you are, and not only on the air but off the air. And so thank you very much for your generosity and your time today, and I thank you for the contribution you've made in this industry, because I've learned so much just over the years listening to you, and then just in getting to know you briefly, I have learned even more about how to conduct myself both on and off the air, and I really appreciate your time.
Bryan, thank you for the kind words, and it's an honor to be with you.
Brad Sham, the legendary voice of the Dallas Cowboys. I'm Bryan Houston. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.